Hi, everybody. Welcome to Piercing the Veil, early edition.
Early edition
That's right.
of Happy Sunday.
Yeah, welcome in, everybody. I see a lot of people getting in chat, saying hi to each other. We got Jessica popped in.
Yeah, and Shelly and Jojo Awaken, Linda, Firewater. I think that was about it so far. Yeah, we got Polly earlier.
Polly earlier.
Yep.
Monisha was in earlier.
All
Roger
right.
Blair. So yeah, it's going to be a fun show talking about the Payseurs. And you may have not heard of that name. I did not hear of that name until Brice, our guest from Esoteric Atlanta, brought it up. And I thought, man, that's going to be a fun subject because we like talking about conspiracies and secret societies. So the Payseurs fit right along those lines. If you guys look up the 13 families of the Illuminati, they're kind of woven in there. If they're not one of the 13 families, they were right in there with them. So we'll have to see what Brice says all about it.
Yeah, this is new to me. So we're going down a new rabbit hole. So we're going to learn something new.
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody should know a lot of these people we're going to be mentioning, or Brice is going to be mentioning. And, it's going to be a fun rabbit hole to go down.
Definitely. So get your coffee ready, popcorn, smokes, whatever you got. There's going to be exciting.
Corey just popped in, and great show on Jessica. Jessica, the Cryptid Hunters, had a great show with Corey and Eric.
Wow. And Clay just came in. Yeah, Corey, that was a really good show last night. Good job, Jessica and Corey. And Eric, yes. Blue Doe came in. Roger came in. Dragonfly.
All right. Well, we'll let everybody just continue to pop in and say hi to each other, and we'll go ahead and bring Brice up.
Hey.
Hi, Brice.
Hello. It's so funny. You know, I was actually thinking about getting Jessica to remote view this story. I know she doesn't like hearing about her targets. Maybe we'll get her to do some other remote viewing targets and just tell her and slip this one in, because you guys, we've got pirates, we've got Freemasons, we've got a missing prince, we've got Napoleon, we've got wars. This story is just the gift that keeps on giving. And I have no idea if the conspiracy is true or not. I see both sides. We're going to be, hey, Jessica, we're going to be, I'm going to be taking from my notes and from this lovely book written by a descendant called Stephen Payseur. And I have to tell you guys, this guy is so freaking funny. This book is self-published, but he's writing about his own family folklore. And the whole time he's like, I don't know, guys. So with that being said, disclaimer, don't go vigilante violent on anybody whose last name is Payseur, okay?
That's what I always think. We get together with our family and stuff, and I always think our history is one way, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, really? You guys know something different? It's like, really? So who are we?
I mean, by the grace of God go I. You think you got some crazy family members in your ancestral line if you dig and look. So please do not go after anybody with the last name Payseur. They could just be like you and me and not know. It'd be none the wiser that this legend is revolves around their family. And we don't know. There's Stephen in his book presents evidence for both, whether it's real or it's not. And it would be a fabulous Hollywood movie if Hollywood was
so.
Yeah.
This
maybe a series on Netflix. That'd be cool.
It would be fabulous, because this story has everything in it. And I'll start by just reading a note from Steve. This is not the funny part. I was telling you, Stephen, this is just kind of the author's note. And he says, what you're about to read is what I think a very interesting story. It's a story of lies and deception. More importantly, it is a story of a small corner of North Carolina and primarily one of the families who lives there. It's a story of connections. Many people have asked me if this tale is true. I can honestly say that I have no idea. I am certain that much of what you read here is not true. Some of what you will read here is definitely true. The task for the reader is to determine for him or herself what to believe. And so I'm going to say that to you guys. It's your task whether you believe this story or not, but it is a fabulous, fabulous story. And it's fun because historically, the main players in this story lived in the 1700s, early 1800s. So, you know, we can laugh a little bit because regardless, they're all dead now. So,
yeah.
So, should we get started? I want to get started.
Yeah, let's just go ahead.
All right, so we got to get started with a little backstory on some of the shenanigans that was going on in continental Europe in our modern. So we got to start a disclaimer. If Tartaria existed, then none of what I'm about to tell you is true.
So you gotta pick which rabbit hole you want to go down.
Oh my. This is going to be a shenanigans show.
This is shenanigans. So for the sake of this story, I want every single audience members just to forget Tartaria for a second and go back to the history that we were taught in school, especially Americans. We were saying off air that for a lot of us, what the backstory and what I'm about to tell you actually affects a lot of Americans. It affects some of my ancestral lineage, apparently. So we're going to be talking about, basically, this is going to start in a nucleus of 3 different areas that border Germany and France. And Germany and France have a lot of very common ancestral. There's, blonde hair, blue eyes. They're both French and German. They're very intermixed, especially at this time. We know borders are imaginary lines anyway. So we have the Palatine region, which borders France and Switzerland, and the Alsace and Lorraine region, which is predominantly French. So over, I know, Gerald, you were saying you have ancestry from the Lorraine region.
Yes.
Of France. Yeah. And I have, I guess Palatine I have some French descendants, obviously, but I also have a lot of German. And I think mine were probably more Palatine, which we'll get into that. So these are right kind of in the same area. And so these borders are constantly changing. No, that's a different part. That's a
different part.
That's a different part. We're going to get to that with the Dauphin. He goes missing. So it's over on the other side by Germany, kind of north, where the English Channel is right there, that area. So ironically, you guys, so the Palatine, which is German, are mostly French speakers, and the Alsace and Lorraine area at this time were mostly German speakers, and they were French. So this is how confused this region of the world is. I mean, bless their hearts as we say down here in the South, for the common person living there, just trying to hoe the fields and grow the produce. They are really living in a lot of contention between these monarchs. So there's been contentious fighting because right now Germany, when our story starts, Germany did not exist as a country as we know it today. It was the Holy Roman Empire. It was lots of principalities. So this is very political. So the Palatine was the land of the court Palatine, who was a secular prince of the Holy Roman Empire. The first one was Hermann I, who came into the office in 945. His line ruled until 1155. The second, Bavarian Wittelbach, took over in 1180. In 1356, now this gets interesting, guys, because there's so much contention. We're building up to this contention between the Protestants and the Catholics. So in 1356, a papal bull was passed that made the Count Palatine an elector of the Holy Roman Empire. So the person who governed the Palatine now had this special little golden piece of paper that said that he could put in his vote for the Holy Roman Emperor, which there was only 11 back then. So that was a pretty big deal. So very staunchly Catholic. Well, curveball comes during the Protestant Reformation. So the Protestant Reformation technically happened on the 31st of October, Halloween, 1517, when Martin Luther put his 95 Theses on the door of the Wittenberg Church. And at that point, Palatine went rogue and it went Protestant. So that is some soap opera stuff.
There you go.
I don't think I'd want to be alive during that time of this because they would just burn you at the stake, right? Right. I think we're a little bit more humane today, but to be a fly on the wall to see that drama take place where you have an elector for the Holy Roman Empire all of a sudden go, nah, you know what? I think we're going to follow this Martin Luther guy, right? That's pretty wild if you guys think about it. So many followers from Europe who were Huguenots, French Protestants all over the world that were following Martin Luther, John Calvin, these Protestants that were challenging. You know, they taught the peasants to read. What are you going to do? You taught the peasants to read. And so they read the Bible and they were like, wait a minute. It doesn't say that in the Bible. So,
right.
so they all ran to Palatine for asylum, basically, for safety. So this is all happening leading up to the story that we're going to tell you guys today about where the Payseur name got from. Well, because they were in asylum, they were constantly being attacked from the Holy Roman Empire. Well, King Louis XIV, who this is now getting into the 1600s, the Sun King, it got so bad and bloody that Catholic France. Now, if you guys remember, before the Bourbons, with which Louis XIV is a Bourbon, the missing prince we're going to talk about today is also a Bourbon. The Bourbons took, if we go back again to the 1500s, the Bourbons took the throne from the Valois family. The Valois, they're cousins, though. They're all the same family. The Valois family, the matriarch at that time was Catherine de Medici. Now, she was known as the Serpent Queen. Oh, I've covered her before. She's fabulous to cover. Wouldn't want to live during her time. She reminds me a lot of Hillary. But she's very scandalous. She was the daughter of a huge banking family from Italy. She married into the French royal family. She had lots of sons. All of them died. Right? She was famous for having Nostradamus. That's how he got famous. He was her personal astrologist. And she was the one that instigated St. Bartholomew's massacre when Henry IV, Henri, married her daughter. He was a Protestant, a Calvinist from the Pyrenees area of France, and they tried to trap them and slaughter all the Protestants. He ended up actually becoming the king after all his cousins were dead. So he became Henri of the first Bourbon line. So he was like the great whatever grandfather of Louis XIV. So there has been so much strife for like over a century in Europe. Like, no wonder our American ancestors, and we were laughing, we're like, you know what? We're going to go try our luck over.
Yeah.
Like in the South, we had malaria back then. We're like, that sounds better. That sounds just a lot better than this bullshit here. So Henri IV, he was a Protestant, but in order for him to maintain his rule, he had to convert back to Catholicism. But he passed what was called the Edict of Nantes, which meant that Protestants, Huguenots, as we say here in America, were free to worship. Then his whatever grandson, Louis XIV, actually revoked and made Protestants prosecute it. So this is crazy, y'all. I mean, this is just like Days of Our Lives has nothing on this that was happening back then. So Louis XIV, who, you know, for all intent and purposes, history tells us he was this great king. He was a tyrant. Like all of these kings, Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, all these greats, anytime that's by their name, they're not so great. They were like Build Back Better group, right? Taxing the crap out of their people. And so Louis XIV, he does what a lot of politicians do. He lied. And he told the Palatine, oh, what a shame. We're so sorry. You're being persecuted by the Holy Rome. We're going to protect you. Only for him to come in almost like a Trojan horse and reattack Palatine because they wanted Palatine for France. Why? Because Palatine, that area, had very lustrous soil. You could produce, there's always a reason why people want land, right? It's why the American colonies were fought over so hard because of what it could produce. Money. You
gotta grow grapes somewhere.
Exactly right. Well, like I said, it's just freaking bananas. So he had so in 1688, Louis XIV claimed the Palatine for France. And then all of a sudden we break into the War of Grand Alliance, which lasted from 1689 to 1697, which basically at that point, the French army came in and basically they declared it for France. Palatine said no. They destroyed the Palatine. Then in 1697, there was a treaty where it went back to the Principality of the Holy Roman Empire, but not for long. Louis the 14th, you know those treaties, they don't mean nothing. Louis the 14th was like going back and scheming on how he's going to try to take that land again. In 1702, there was the War of Spanish Succession that was going on. 1709, 7,000 Palatines were displaced. I was laughing. That's when some of my ancestors in that area hightailed it to Charleston, South Carolina, to the Carolinas. Now, we were saying before, and this is going to get into it, guys. If you look at American history, we have the original 13 colonies, all the East Coast, basically.
Right.
Florida,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so these are all English colonies, but it wasn't all English settlers. So a lot of people, the Southeast is predominantly English in culture. We have a lot of English people here. My last name is Watson, but we also have equally a lot of French heritage as well as German. Why was this? Because because coming into the English colonies was a safe haven for Protestants. And so even if they didn't speak the language, they came to the English colonies because they felt safe. They weren't going to get burned at the stake. They weren't going to get their heads chopped off for being a Protestant. Charleston, South Carolina, where my mom's from, which my ancestors came to Charleston in the 1600s, settled there, just never left. They were like, we're done. We're just going to stay right here. It has a French Quarter. People don't know that. I always think of New Orleans has the French Quarter, and it does. Charleston's French Quarter is a lot more tame than New Orleans, but there's the Ravenel Bridge. There's a lot of French heritage in the Carolinas, right? Because of the Huguenots. It was serious back then. That was very serious crime to be in a country in Europe that was Catholic and to be a practicing Protestant.
Right.
It's a huge crime. And so I was telling you guys offline, my grandmother, my mom's mom, her first cousin is the late Strom Thurmond, who was one of the longest running senators here in the United States. Strom was my grandmother's maiden name, and I think it was my grandmother's father, his sister was Strom Thurmond's mother, so he had his mother's maiden name. And so they wrote a book about his ancestry. That's how I know this from this line, because they were peasants in Germany, the Stroms, who this was what was going on. This is why they left. They stopped in England for a while, then came down to Charleston and helped build the city, didn't speak a lick of English. And so this is a lot of Americans. I mean, that's a lot of Americans have ancestors came here because of this. So if you get nothing from this story and you're an American and you know you have ancestors from this region, like the crap your ancestors went through to get here,
right,
you can handle a lot. You have the same blood that ran through them run through you.
Mm-hmm.
So you come from tough stock, right?
I think that's why America's so great, because we had all these people that migrated here because of persecution, whatever their reasons, and plus they had to handle starting over and building themselves up. I think that's why America's so great.
No, and I will say that with the Windstroms is what they were now. It changed to Strom over time. They were so poor when they got to Charlestown, as it was called back then, that they weren't even taken in the first few censuses because they couldn't speak English. But they helped build the city. So now apparently, I still have yet to find it. Whenever I'm in Charleston, I always look. Apparently there's a plaque somewhere that honors them as helping because of Strom Thurmond, because they were literally peasants. Like they only got put on the map because of Strom Thurmond. But think about that though. You're right. Like think about these peasants who are just trying to live, and their life is so hard. They'd rather just risk it all and go to this new place where the weather was totally different, malaria, muggy, and they had nothing, couldn't even speak the language. And all these generations later, one of their descendants is a senator now. Like that is what makes America great, is that we don't believe, I mean, the people, our Constitution, I know we're in a struggle right now, don't believe in like a ruling class, like we the people. And so, but for all the Americans watching right now, if that means a lot to you, like you're tough, you come from tough people, to get here and to do that. That's really important. And so I guess we can owe a bit of gratitude to that asshole Louis the 14th. So if he didn't pull his shenanigans, we might not be here today. So anyway, so with that being said, this is where we see the first mention of the name Payseur. Now, with that being said, if you guys go to research this for yourself, Stephen Payseur makes note of this. There's many different spellings of the name Payseur. Okay, so don't be confused by that. Like I said, My grandmother's maiden name, Strom, Strom, her maiden name, it was when they moved here, Vunstrom, Vunstrum. So things do change over time. And so don't be put off by that. He goes through all this different spellings in this book. I won't bore you guys with that though, but if you do research for yourself, just know that. So we have a Hans Jacob Payseur in 1647. And we know, this is what's so interesting too. Keep this in mind, you guys. We know that Payseur is a French Huguenot name.
Oh.
Payseur family was a big Huguenot family. All right. Again, for us in 2025, that might not matter that much. No one really cares. Back then, though, this was a really big deal. Okay. Really big deal. So we do have on record here, and this is where the records get really fascinating, because history, they're not that great at keeping records sometimes. And some of the records we do have, we're questioning a little bit. So, and this is the struggle that Stephen in his book goes back and forth, because we have two stories here of this Payseur family here in the United States. For example, in the history books, it says that there is a John George Payseur who was born in Pennsylvania in 1720. So this guy was born in Pennsylvania. He wasn't born in France. That's what we have in the records. Now, he did die in 1818 at 98 years old, and he was born at Bethel Church Cemetery in Dallas, North Carolina. Now, interestingly enough, this is a Lutheran church. Lutheran is German. So remember how the Payseur, this whole Palatine, Lorraine, Alsace area, it's kind of this mixed match of French and German. So that's super interesting. Now, in North Carolina, he was known by his second name as George, just George Payseur Sr. George and his wife Carlotta had 7 children. We're going to follow George Jr., one of his sons, George Jr. George Jr. was born in 1764, allegedly here in the United States. He had a wife, Hannah. They had 8 children. One of their children was a boy named Daniel. He's also buried in North Carolina. Now, George Jr. died in 1851. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on Daniel. So we see a line of Payseurs that are registered as being born here in the United States. They came over during this whole issue that was happening. And now we're going into the 1700s. And I'm actually going to read from Stephen's book, The Lost Dauphin. Now, I'm sure most of you guys know, but Dauphin is a prince, a French prince. So this is when it gets, so now that we have that whole background, this is when it starts to get juicy. So if you guys remember, let's go back to the French Revolution. Do we have any French people in the audience? Because I have to say, if I were the Macrons right now, I would be kind of nervous, because no one throws a revolution like the French do. I mean, the American Revolution was unicorns and rainbows compared to the French Revolution. They were just chopping heads off.
Right.
Like, I would be terrified if the French revolution. I mean, I was laughing hysterically when the farmers were spewing cow dung.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
Politicians,
Yeah.
they're going to pull the guillotines out next again. So, but with that being said, I want you guys, we're going to get into this, because for the Americans, the French helped us win the American Revolution, right? They came in, and we're going to talk about Lafayette. We're going to talk about some of these French generals in a minute. So the fledgling United States, this new country, Louis XVI sent his army. Now, here's the thing. And we know Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette probably did deserve to be executed. Let's be honest. I think sometimes we like to romanticize these people, but they probably deserved it. Let's be real. They probably deserved it. But there's this huge, we know that Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were not the smartest rulers. This is what happens when you make people rulers by bloodline instead of merit. You have oopsie-daisies, right? And we know that the French have always struggled with the English. There's always been a struggle between the French and the English, even though the French monarchy and the English monarchy are cousins, right? Strange how that works. So my suspicion is this young Louis XVI sent the troops over to help the colonists fight, because he wanted to get one up on the English. But what I don't think he thought about, like the full picture, was that once the Americans won their independence and didn't have a king anymore, all
bets are off.
Are they going to come back to France and be like, you know what? I think we don't need you anymore. So this was going on all over Europe. This actually cracks me up the way he writes about this, is because all of these monarchies in Europe were like, oh shit, like when that
What'd we do?
These peasants actually beat us. Like WTF, like, oh shit, like what do we like? It just, so there was a lot of stress going on in monarchies all over Europe at this time. So he starts out saying, after the American Revolution, most of the monarchies in Europe were uneasy. They were afraid that the radical concept of government by the common people would somehow take hold in Europe and elsewhere. This was a particularly worrisome feeling in both England and France. Well, George III was a laughingstock because he lost the colonies, right? He lost the colonies. And I always say the American Revolution wasn't against the English people, it was against the monarchy. A lot of the colonists had family in England. It wasn't the people. And so the English people are probably like, wait a minute, if our cousin and his pitchfork could get freedom, what about us? So people are stressing, right? In England, King George III was still smarting from the loss of his most valuable colonies, the American colonies. It also didn't help England's reputation as a military force when their army and navy could not suppress the revolution. At that time, England was the world's major superpower. This was also a concern in France. France had aided the American colonies in their struggles against England. Of course, the French knew the English were not too happy about that aid and were quite certain that the English had what English had in mind for them. So now Louis's like, oh my God, England's going to invade us. This is, I mean, what comedy, right? There was also concern that Frenchmen returning from the war in America would begin to think that perhaps the common Frenchman could run his native country just like the Americans were. Those were valid concerns, as the French Revolution a few years later would prove. As much as England and France were suspicious of each other, the monarchs were even more suspicious of their citizens. Monarchy all over Europe, as much as they despised the Americans. American Revolution were even more concerned with preserving their own monarchy. After all, it was a pretty good life being king. As the French Revolution progressed to the outs of the king and queen, and then Napoleon began his conquest of continental Europe, it seemed as if the world was turning upside down. So, with the French Revolution, we know that the monarchy, Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, their surviving children, Maria Theresa and Louis Charles. Marie Antoinette was a Habsburg. She was from Austria, a huge dynastic family, Habsburg. The Habsburg chin, like super inbred. So they had a plan to get to Austria because they knew that things were not looking good. And they almost escaped, except that these dumbasses, Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette would not put peasant clothes on to go in disguise across the border. Just that alone, they kind of deserve what they got. Like, they wouldn't just look poor for like an hour to cross the border. So that's when they got caught. So we're building up to this French, and you guys know the French Revolution was so bloody. There was literally blood running down the streets. Like, I joke about it, but it was, people were starving. Like, this was the French Revolution was very different than the American Revolution. Not only did the revolution succeed in France, but King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette, the queen, were imprisoned along with their children. In 1793, the impossible occurred. Both Louis XVI and his queen Marie Antoinette were beheaded in public on the guillotine. Shockwaves radiated through Europe. Can you imagine being a monarch and the impossible just happened? You're like, wait a minute, what? We know Anne Boleyn got her head chopped off, as did Catherine Howard over in England, and as did Charles, the first, with the English Civil War. But to have like bloodlines, Marie Antoinette was a Habsburg. What?
Right.
She got beheaded like a common peasant. Like, what are you talking about? So, like the monarchs all over the world were like, oh my God, what is happening? After their deaths, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette had 2 surviving children, Maria Theresa and Louis Charles, the Dauphin. So Louis Charles was younger than Maria Theresa, but he was the prince. The word Dauphin at that time meant the eldest son of the King of France, in other words, heir to the throne. Both the children were imprisoned with their parents, and they were young, you guys. Like, he was like 8, she was maybe 10. And I want to make that very clear. I was saying, you guys, offline, a while ago, I was in some Telegram group, and I saw these truthers disgustingly talking about how the British royal children need to be because of their, and I was like, what are you talking about? These are children. Like, it doesn't matter who these are babies.
Right.
Whatever happened to protect the children? Only some children? These are innocent children who are also being abused. Like, I don't know. So just the thought of 2 small children being stuck in the prisons back then. I mean, rats were everywhere. This was not an ideal situation for anyone, much less young children. So after her parents' execution, Marie Theresa was exiled to Austria to live with her mother's family. She lived for a while in England and Russia and finally died of pneumonia in what was then Austria of 1851 when she was 73 years old. So the story really revolves around Louis Charles. Why? Because he's the Dauphin. He's the problem. In France, they have a law they did have a law where only male heirs could rule, which was different from England, because England had Elizabeth, Mary. I mean, there had been many female rulers, but France did not have this. So it could only come from the male line. So Marie Theresa is not a threat because she's a female.
Right.
So they send her to live with her aunt over in Austria. So they got this like 8-year-old kid on their hands. They don't know what to do with. They don't know what to do with him. The story of Louis Charles the Dauphin is a little bit more confusing and mysterious. Rumors have persisted over the years that the Dauphin did not die in prison, as the official records attest. Instead, many believe that he somehow escaped and lived elsewhere in secret. That's the story we're going to get to, guys.
Dum, dum, dum.
Ended up in North Carolina, y'all. Quite a change from Versailles to Dallas, North Carolina. So, and I was telling you guys this. What's interesting? So, in 2000, Louis Charles' remains were exhumed. This conspiracy has been around for so long, you guys, that they actually went and exhumed the remains of this child to test his DNA. Now, all they could figure out was the mitochondrial DNA, which did match relatives of Marie Antoinette. So all we know about the child that was buried as Louis Charles is that he was related to Marie Antoinette. Mitochondrial DNA does not tell you, though, if that's her son. Like, my mitochondrial DNA is going to match my mother's sister's. So if you exhumed my body and it matched my cousin's children, that's because our mothers were sisters. It's mitochondrial DNA. So we're still clueless. We don't know if this is Louis Charles or not. Okay. So here's the story. In October of 1793, Marie Antoinette climbed the steps to the scaffold and was beheaded just like her husband before her. Reportedly, her last words were, "I am sorry for what I have done." She said this because she had stepped on the foot of one of the men waiting on the scaffolding. Still locked away in prison were her 2 surviving children, Maria Theresa and the young Dauphin, Louis Charles. There were many in the country who wanted to see the young Louis Charles, now nominally Louis the 17th. So he is now Louis the 17th, whether he knows it or not, because his dad's dead. So even though there's a revolution going on, this 8-year-old is now Louis the 17th to take his rightful throne. One of these men was a man named Toulon. Sorry if my French is bad. He was known for that's the Dauphin. Yes, that is one of the last remaining paintings we have of this little boy, Louis Charles.
Wow.
He was known, this one man. So you still had people in France in this revolution who were sympathetic to the royalists. Okay.
So that's a little boy.
It was a little boy. That's a little boy.
It has a female face.
Well, he was young. He was like 7. And he was pampered, y'all. He grew up in Versailles. He wasn't out playing baseball with his friends. He was being preserved and then thrown in a freaking prison. So much that he had given a nickname Fidele by the Queen. He had been working for some time to have the royal family released from prison with no success. So this is where it gets really, and again, I apologize. French is not my first language. So if I butcher some of these names, please forgive me. Because there's a lot of people involved in this plot, y'all. He and a group of other people continue to work for the release of the young king, only 8 years old. His group include Marquis Zarzay, Dr. Nodin, and Dr. Saunier. The money behind these loyalists was a member of the privileged class, the Prince de Condé. Now let's talk about the Prince de Condé, because of course I had to look this up. Y'all, it's so much. Like being born to a royal family, like everyone's your cousin. Like everyone.
Brothers, sisters, cousins, whatever.
I tried to follow this back and I was like, they're all fucking related to each other. What is it? So the French thing, remember how I told you guys, like, this is a French at this point was only male rule. Like it skipped over females. It was only male. So the Prince de Condé was a cadet branch of the House of Bourbon, the male line of descendants of one monarch. And this monarch was the bloodline of Louis the Ninth, who was the king of France from 1226 to 1270. So beyond the Valois, beyond the Bourbons, they have this Louis the Ninth is their singular descendant. Yeah, girl. We might have some Southern Payseurs, some of those Southern Payseurs. And can you imagine if Marie Antoinette could see her descendants living in North Carolina now? So for those who live in St. Louis is named after King Louis the Ninth, allegedly. So that is the cadet of this particular lineage comes from this particular monarch from 1226 to 1270, Louis the Ninth. So this is the guy now, the Prince de Condé, the cousin of this 8-year-old kid. His name is Louis Joseph de Bourbon. Like they love their Louis in France, don't they? You think they would come with that? What about like Pierre? Like we throw another name in there, you know? Too many Louis. So he's cousins, and he sends money to Marquis Zarzay, Dr. Nodin, and Dr. Saunier to secure the release and the kidnapping of the Dauphin. Again, you guys, this kid is 8. Like, can you imagine the trauma? Like, if he lived today, that kid would be in trauma therapy. So the plan was to free and then move him to Vendée. So that map you pulled up, Gerald, that's Vendée. Vendée was a stronghold for royalist support in France. They were going to get him to Vendée, get him in protection until he can be restored to the throne as the ruler. Okay, this is where it gets kind of funny, you guys. It's all kind of funny. The plan they concocted was to replace the young king with a young boy of similar size and build with Louis Charles. The Marquis Zarzay had found such a boy, cousin of the young king. This boy was very sick. Dr. Nodin was sent to confirm that this boy could pass for Louis. He confirmed the boy was suffering from a form of scrofula. And I asked you guys, I'd never heard of scrofula before, so I Googled it just to see what it was. It's basically a lymph disorder. They called it the king's disease. So I was saying it probably has like hemophilia. Not all lymph disorders are from inbreeding. I want to make that clear. There's tons of different lymph disorders. But this one, from what I read about it, seems like it's a particular lymph disorder that has to do with inbreeding. So basically, and this is what gets me, they're going through so much trouble to save this one kid only to sacrifice another one. Like, This is just, what? Like, this is, They say history is like a foreign country. They do things differently there. So he was about to lose the use of his limbs. He was deaf, and the disease he suffered from, and it had damaged his brain. So he was no longer coherent on the rare occasions when he tried to speak. So they found this cousin. Obviously, like I said, they exhumed the body, so this could be a cousin because the mitochondrial DNA. This obviously, if my reading of this particular disease is correct, this is obviously a inbred issue, and the Habsburg we know that was a big problem with the Habsburgs. So there were two people who worked in the prison, a Mr. and Mrs. Simone, who were persuaded to assist the Marquis Zarzay and Dr. Nodin in freeing Louis Charles. They were persuaded because they were promised a house and lots of money. So money talks, right?
Right.
So the young Louis Charles himself was not well because of being in that prison. The dampness of the cell had kept it, and the abuse he suffered had taken a toll on his health. So he could pass for getting sicker, right? He had requested some toys to play with, which breaks my heart. Like, this is still an 8-year-old kid. He just wants some toys to play with. Yeah, like his parents have been killed. He's in this prison. He hasn't seen his sister, and he just wants some toys. So the Public Safety Committee had consented to his request. Mr. Simon was in charge of finding the hobby horse that Louis Charles had requested, which makes me wonder, did Louis Charles actually request a rocking horse? Basically is what a hobby horse is. Remember I had a rocking horse. I don't know if kids have rocking horses. So they find this rocking horse, and Dr. Noden was visiting the prison every day, insisting to the officials that, oh my God, Louis Charles, he's very sick. He's probably going to die. He's very, very sick. He decided to convince the officials that they needed to cut Louis Charles's hair short so that his brain would not overheat. And the fact that they sold that story back then just shows you how far we've come in our understanding of, but the reason why they want to cut his hair is because his cousin had short hair, right?
Right.
So the date was set on the morning Dr. Noden in Toulon picked up the hobby horse, the rocking horse that they had purchased from a local toy store. It had a hollow body and was quite large. So basically they Trojan horsed this kid in. They put this kid, this sick, poor child, in a rocking horse. They brought the rocking horse into the prison, and they made the switch. So Mr. Simon went into the cell and replaced the boy from the horse and dressed him in the king's clothes. The king was dressed as a peasant and hidden in the washwoman's, Mrs. Simone's, laundry basket. Like little orphan Annie. Isn't that how she escaped, in a laundry basket? That's what they did with Louis Charles. They put him in a laundry basket. The next morning, Toulon arrived to help the Simones move to their new home in the country. Among their belongings was a very large basket containing Louis Charles, now Louis XVII, the boy king of France. This was on January 19th, 1794. The carriage drove so slowly to the country until they came to the village where there was a port, where a washerwoman was waiting. They unloaded the basket from their carriage and placed it in the carriage of the washerwoman. This was no ordinary washerwoman. This was the Marquis Zarzay, dressed in drag, basically. And they delivered the king to the Prince de Condé in Vendée. Now, like, it's real. Like, this, again, this poor child. Like, I actually have a lot of empathy for if this story is true. So cousin's now dead, like the little boy. They've buried him. They think he's the real Louis Charles in this story is now in the palace with the Prince de Condé in Vendée, being protected. No one knows he's alive, but the small group of royalists, and they're going to put him back on the throne. They're planning this time. They're going to win the French Revolution. They're going to put this kid back on the throne. But we have a problem. This problem is Napoleon. So they're like, well, okay, we got to do something different because now Napoleon is getting some suspicions that something's going on. He doesn't like the French royalty anyway. And you guys, just because Napoleon opposed the French royalty doesn't mean he's a good guy either. He became an emperor himself. So they find a person that no one would suspect. This guy's name, General Kleber. Now, General Kleber, he was born Jean-Baptiste Kleber. He was born in the Alsace region, that area again, in 1753. He was one of Napoleon's most successful generals. He was also known for his reluctance to fight and his disdain for his superiors. So he was kind of forced to fight for Napoleon, but didn't really like him. So perfect person, right? When he was engaged in battle, he fought to win. The Napoleon stated Kleber shone during the campaign fighting well at all these different places, right? So Louis Charles is given to this general who works for Napoleon. He's told that now has new paperwork saying that he's Kleber's nephew. So over time, Napoleon must look back at this and be like, I was an idiot. How did I not know that Louis is like right in front of me? And I think it's Kleber's nephew. So then Louis has to go and like fight with this. So this little kid who was in a prison, whose parents got their heads chopped off, who was taken in a laundry basket, held in a castle, now is told he's got a new identity and he's got to go to war with this guy
that hates him.
childhood just wasn't the same back then. So this kid, we haven't even made it to North Carolina yet, y'all. Like, we're still in Europe, so he's going around. He's learning how to fight. Like, he is learning some valuable skills from this guy. He's learning to be a man, right? He's learning to do things that he probably wouldn't learn how to do if he was like the feeble little king of France, right? Like, he's learning how to he's being toughened up, right?
Right.
So anyway, Kleber gets sick. He passes away. But Kleber was quite wealthy, and he actually, because Kleber didn't have any children, so he left his will, all of his estate, to Louis Charles. This would equal about $1 million today, right? Which actually, sadly, isn't that much today, but it's enough to start a new life, right?
Right.
But all of a sudden, now, like, you remember how Napoleon was probably like, I'm such an idiot. Now Napoleon knows that that's actually Louis Charles. Somebody squills. So now, they have to get this kid out of France. So now he's sent to the English court because Queen Charlotte and Marie Antoinette are distant cousins. I'm telling y'all, they're all related. So he goes to England where he stays. He's like 16 at this time. He's in. Y'all thought y'all had your childhood, Rob. This kid's only 16. And look what he's been through. Right? Not even at he just got tossed around, like not even at his choosing. So all of a sudden, King Charles III starts to panic a little bit because if the English people were to find out that they are harboring, the royal family of England is harboring the fugitive Dauphin, it's going to piss the English people off. And they've already lost the American Revolution. So one of the people that had sought exile in England was the man who was the weight master for Louis XVI, Louis XVII, Louis Charles's father. Now, what is a weight master? A weight master is basically an accountant. They weigh the gold and silver. And that's also, so even though Payseur is a Huguenot name, it also means weight master. So they decide to divide this plan. They now give Louis XVII, Louis Charles, the name of Daniel Payseur.
Right. Because
the guy who worked for Louis the 16th was George Payseur, or whatever the French version of George is. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. This is where we have a bit of a problem, right? Because I told you guys we have George Jr. We have records that he was born in 1764 here in the fledgling United States. But here we have record that George Payseur was actually Louis XVII's accountant. And Louis Charles becomes Daniel Payseur, his son. They send him over to North Carolina. Now, this is where it gets real funny too. Because if this story is correct, King George III. Y'all know how when you were little, we all did it. We signed our parents' names to things.
Right. Yep.
Which is technically fraud, but who cares, right? Well, before the American rule, so at this point, Louis Charles, who is now Daniel Payseur, we're going to America with this guy, George Payseur, who's now technically his father. But there's a small problem. Just a small problem. England doesn't own the colonies anymore. So what to do? What are we going to do? That's how they say it in India. What to do? Well, George III decides. So after the American Revolution, the government, George Washington, our new government, were quite kind. And they said to people that if you were given a land grant by the king before the American Revolution, we're going to let you keep the land. We're not going to take the land from you. So George III goes, I know what I'll do. I'll forge a land grant and sign my dad's name to it. So he signs a land grant. And this we do know is true. We do have the paperwork of this land grant. The only thing that is quite comical is that the county he put in there didn't exist until after the American Revolution. So it was obviously like George III wasn't that bright, right? Like he wasn't that bright. So, but I guess they just didn't question it at that point. They just didn't question it. And so that is how Daniel Payseur. Now, again, going back to the original story, we had George Sr., who apparently was born in Pennsylvania in 1720. So I hope that makes sense. We have two conflicting stories now.
Right.
Family, which again, they didn't keep good records back then. Obviously, I mean, King George III was able to freaking forge the crap out of a land grant for the county that didn't even exist before the American Revolution. So they're living in this small area of North Carolina around the Dallas area, Lincoln County. Yeah, it's very close. It's in, so if you know where Tennessee is, it's right kind of near Tennessee, South Carolina, near Spartanburg, South Carolina. Very, very small area of North Carolina. So now we get into Marshall Michelle Ney. So we have this family. We'll go through these people pretty quickly. We have Marshall Michelle Ney, Jean Lafitte, and the Marquis de Lafayette. So now all these people have something in common. They're all French, and they're all Freemasons.
Oh.
So we have this Payseur family living in North Carolina. Now, George Jr., so this guy who allegedly was the wait master for Louis XVI, is now living in the UK or in North Carolina with Daniel Payseur. They have 7 other children, right? So we know that they had 8 children. One of them was Daniel Payseur. Well, there was always something kind of weird about this family, because out of all the 8 children, Daniel did not quite look like the other kids.
Huh.
Tell me that, Batman. Now they had different birthdays for Daniel. That was a little bit like, he would have been like, he would have been like 8 years younger than Louis Charles, but they explained it that back then, because Louis Charles had been so sick, that his health would have declined, so his stature would have been smaller, so he could, and he explains it, you know, like when an 8-year-old and a 16-year-old, there's a huge difference between an 8-year-old and a 16-year-old.
Right.
But a 50-year-old and a 58-year-old, it's passable. So at this point, though, with Louis Charles being like 16, he would have had to pass for like 8 or 9, which could have happened if he was maybe scarred from his sickness or malnourishment when he was, I mean, let's face it, he was already inbred because of his mama being a Habsburg. So,
Right.
you know, who knows? But that is a question that Stephen does bring up in his book. Like, you know, we have to consider that they did mark his birthday as being 8 years younger than he actually was. But in this town, this family was French, which again, isn't that weird? Because there are a lot of French people there. So hearing people speak French is not that big of a deal. There are a lot of Huguenots. But again, Daniel was strange because he did not look like the rest of his siblings. And when they started going to schools, they always commented that Daniel seemed to have a higher level of education than his siblings.
Oh.
Now, of course, education was done differently back then. His penmanship was better. He was more eloquent. Now, I don't know, because Louis Charles would have been like 7 when he was brought into the prison. So how much education had he gotten before? Yeah, I don't know. It could have been that Daniel was just really smart. I don't know. So very interesting that the people in the town noticed that he was different. There was an air about him that was very different from his siblings. So we have Marshal Michelle Ney, who was a general for Napoleon. He soon after he allegedly was executed for being a treason for committing treason against Napoleon and Louis XVIII. So after Napoleon was captured, Louis XVII, Daniel Payseur's uncle, came back in and he became Louis XVIII, because Louis XVII was technically Louis Charles, who was sitting in a casket, right?
Right.
So in Charleston Harbor, Charleston, South Carolina, in 1860, a ship docked. And a man named Peter Stewart Ney got out of the ship. He was very French, looked very familiar. Guys, remember, back in these days, they didn't have TV. So
Right.
generals, politicians all over the world, these were their celebrities. So people would have recognized. It would be like recognizing, I guess, General Flynn, right? Like, and all of a sudden, the people in Charleston were like, aren't you supposed to be dead? Like,
Yeah.
Gossip in Charleston, listen, my mom's from Charleston. It's a very social town. There's a great reality show called Southern Charm. It's based in Charleston, very social. So it spread like wildfire. He quickly left Charleston and he settled right where Daniel Payseur and the Payseurs were living. Now, again, apparently, Marshal Ney was executed by a firing squad in France in December of 1850. Now, this is strange, you might be thinking, because didn't they chop people's heads off?
Oh,
France back in
right.
that time? So there was already conspiracies in France that he didn't really get executed. So the French people already suspected that he had faked his death, because they also took him to a place where like not many people saw, like it was very secluded. And when the muskets went off, he fell forward instead of backwards. So even back then, even though they thought your hair made your brain hot, they did know that if you got shot, you would go backwards instead of forward. So they did have some common sense. So the whole, and they quickly took his body, they covered his sheet, and then no one ever saw him again. He was buried in a secret location. Even his wife didn't come to see him. So rumors were already abound in France at this time that this was faked, and that those rumors had reached Charleston. So when this guy gets off, they're like, huh, he looks a lot like us. And his last name Day. He's heavy French speaker, very French nationalist. So the story goes that they shot blanks, and he put cow blood in his jacket and fell forward to make sure the blood splashed. And they covered him up and took him and sent him to America. Well, he was sent to America allegedly by Louis XVIII to keep an eye on Daniel Payseur. Ney moved to the area to keep an eye on Daniel Payseur, to be available to assist or summon aid if needed. Regardless of which side Ney had served in France, he was still a Frenchman and was loyal to his homeland. He was also very good friends with Benjamin Franklin, which they knew each other through the Nine Sisters Freemason Lodge in Paris. These are
Benjamin Franklin used to go over there all the time.
Benjamin Franklin, out of all of the American forefathers, he's the one that's a little bit suspicious to me, because there's some very weird allegations towards him and his little shenanigans. A lot
of partying over in France.
A lot of girls, a lot of bodies found. So I've been to his grave in Philadelphia many times when I was there practicing with David Garrigues. But anyway, so we have Benjamin Franklin's going to like connect with a lot of these guys that are allegedly sent to North Carolina to check on Daniel Payseur, because of he was the ambassador in France at the time. Nine Sisters Lodge comes up a lot in this story. So now here's the thing. A few years ago, they did have the body exhumed in North Carolina. They tested the DNA to see if it was, and it did not match. So they say. Doesn't mean that Michel Ney did not fake his death, though, because it seems quite possible he did. The next we have is Jean Lafitte. Now, we could do a whole show. I love my pirates. Jean Lafitte was quite a pirate. He put Blackbeard to shame. He was late in the game. He was a later pirate. He was French. Jean Lafitte, we don't know much about his birth. He could have been born in France. He could have been born in one of the French provinces. He worked a lot in New Orleans. New Orleans, Louisiana became a part of the United States in the early 1800s, like 1803, when it was purchased. There's Jean Lafitte. He was one of the 10 most wealthiest men in the United States. He was a slave trader, so he was involved in trafficking of humans. He did not like calling himself a pirate. He preferred to call himself a privateer, which is the same thing. It's the same thing. He fought alongside Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812. That's where he got really famous. And allegedly he died some mysterious death in Texas, which there's actually a book. I wrote it down somewhere in my notes here. There was a book written a few years back. I'll have to look for it. I know I wrote it down somewhere, where people did deep research into Jean Lafitte, because the claims of him actually being Lorenzo Ferrer in North Carolina seem to add up. And this actually does seem to be Jean Lafitte, the pirate, that after he faked his death, came to this town where Daniel Payseur is, this small, tiny, think Mayberry town where Daniel. So now we've got Michel Ney, Jean Lafitte, and this weird little French family with this kid that doesn't look like all the other kids. And they all kind of circle around this kid. Lorenzo Ferreira, obviously, as Jean Lafitte, very wealthy, lots of gold. Thus, this legend starts with this gold that Daniel Payseur allegedly had. All this money. He's richer than all his siblings. Where's this money coming from? Okay. So Jean Lafitte's there keeping an eye. I call them his handlers. You know, if Jean Lafitte might have been a handler for, as we would say today. We also have the Marquis de Lafayette, which the Marquis, if you ever see Hamilton, the Broadway play, the Marquis de Lafayette was a huge player in the American Revolution. He was like 21 years old when he came over and he fought alongside George Washington, but he also stayed in very close proximity to the Bourbons. So he was very much, it's weird, like he fought along George Washington for the American Revolution, but he also supported the monarchy over in France. So I think he fought with the Americans just to give the middle finger to England is my position on that. Cause he definitely was an elitist. He for sure wasn't. His wife was like distant. So we have, most states have a Lafayette county or city named after them. So in 1824, President Monroe invited Lafayette to visit the United States as a guest of the government. This was in part to help the nation celebrate its 50th anniversary. While in the United States, Lafayette toured all 24 states, covering about 6,000 miles. Now, in this book, he has all these articles. Lafayette goes to places where there's Freemasonry lodges. He visits all these Freemasonry lodges. He goes to big cities, right? Big Charleston, New York, like all these places. You know where else he goes? Little tiny town in North Carolina.
Imagine that.
Imagine that, where these Payseurs are living. Like, little one-stop town. Little one-horse town. And it was a rainy day. Like the weather was bad. They're in wagons, right? It's savage to go. This is like at the base of the Appalachians too. And he has to get there to meet with Daniel Payseur. So the assumption is at this point, they're still trying to figure out a way to get Louis XVII back on the throne. Like, I think that ship sailed at this point, y'all.
I think so.
I think he's got a piece of hay hang out of his mouth, and I think he's like, I never asked for this. Y'all brought the rocking horse in. Like, I gotta just, So at this point, obviously, Daniel never goes back to France. He never becomes. Oh, and Lafayette was also really good friends with Andrew Jackson, who fought with Jean Lafitte and was very big in the Nine Sisters Freemasons. They're all Freemasons, like heavy in the Daniel Payseur was also a Freemason. Imagine that. So let's go and look now at the descendants of Daniel Payseur, because this is where it gets interesting. Daniel Payseur, I mean, God bless him, bless his heart. He lived such a crazy life in the beginning. He was probably like, I don't want it. Like, let me breathe for a minute. I did my world tour. Like, this is fine. So Daniel Payseur, if we're following along now, if he is Louis the 17th, he is the son of Marie Antoinette and Louis the 16th. Okay, so Daniel Payseur is the biological son. All right, so let's go. I'm going to read from about Daniel Payseur because we're going to follow down to Jonas and Cass Payseur. So Jonas Payseur is Daniel's firstborn son. So at this time, the firstborn son gets most of the inheritance. Okay. So Jonas Payseur is Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI's grandson, if this is correct. Cass Payseur, Jonas's son, is the great grandson of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI. So if Cass Payseur is, in fact, the great-grandson, and Jonas and Daniel are all descendants, they carry, this is where the Illuminati comes in, because they carry Habsburg blood and Bourbon blood. That's Cass. Cass is the real interesting one. That's where people start scratching their heads with Cass. Okay, so we have these. So I'm just going to read, because Stephen says it best himself. So George Jr., the guy who was allegedly the weight master for Louis the 16th, married Hannah Hole in Lincoln County, North Carolina in 1780. George and Hannah are both buried at the old Kastner Cemetery in what is now Gaston County. According to Marino, another guy who wrote about the Payseurs, George Jr. died in 1851 and Hannah in 1844. Before their deaths, they brought into the world 8 children, one of which was Daniel Payseur. Question mark on whether he was biologically theirs or not. Daniel Payseur was born in 1793. Again, about 8 years off from Louis Charles. and was the third son and fourth child of George Payseur Jr. So that means other kids came over, if the legend is correct, as his siblings. All right. In 1814, Daniel married Susan Kistner in Lincoln County, North Carolina. Both Daniel and Suzanne are buried at the Daniel Payseur Cemetery. So it was called the Daniel Pay. That's how rich this family was. Daniel Payseur Cemetery, which is now called Walnut Grove. How North Carolinian is that? Walnut Grove. Actually, Jessica, if you're still in the chat, we could probably take a day trip to this town. It's very close.
Walnut Grove is in Little House on the Prairie, right?
That's on the other side of the country, I think.
Yeah, I know, but it's just funny. It's the same name.
Walnut Grove. It
went Walnut Grove.
Daniel Payseur Cemetery to Walnut Grove. Daniel passed in 1867 and Susanna in 1875. According to their records, they had 10 children. This is as close as we can get to an official record of Daniel Payseur. All right, so we're pointing out that the Dauphin, Louis Charles of France, was the son of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, was actually Daniel Payseur. Again, he goes through, there seems to be some discrepancy here, as Daniel Payseur was born in 1793 and the Dauphin was born in 1785. So he's saying that there is that big difference, but we already covered that.
Right.
All right. So in the United States in the late 1700s and early 1800s, there was very little formal record keeping. Most births and death records were noted in a family Bible. I'm laughing because my granddad used to write. My dad's dad, had our social security numbers written in the family Bible.
Oh, my.
I mean, bless he's not here with us anymore, but he had all of his grandchildren's social security numbers. I don't know who has that Bible now, but I hope to God they took a white out and just covered up. So for those who are not from the South, that was really common back then. That was really common to put information in family Bibles. That was as good as gold as far as records. So let's see. Of course, these notations are often very accurate, particularly if family notes them right away. However, as years go by, sometimes memories become fuzzy. So the accuracy of these records is largely dependent on who made the notations and how long from the event they were made. Daniel Payseur was the third son of George, yet by all accounts in family lore, there was something different about him. As I said, all of George Payseur's children lived in the same general area, from Kings Mountain, North Carolina, up to Lincoln County and Catawba County areas. All of them were farmers and or dealt in trading with their friends and neighbors. All had basically the same schooling and education levels, but there were some differences. Many family members were commended after reading old letters by many families have commented after reading old letters written by Daniel that he seemed to have a much more education than his brothers and sisters, all that kind of stuff. Someone said Daniel couldn't be a Payseur because he was way too smart. I thought that was funny. Somebody in the family was like, he couldn't be one of us. He's way too smart. So all throughout the years, there have been persistent rumors of a chest of gold that was owned by Daniel. There have been none of these rumors associated with any of his brothers or sisters. There are even stories of this chest being buried on land once owned by Daniel along the base of Payseur Mountain. So there's a Payseur Mountain. That's how big of a deal this family was in this area in Gaston County, North Carolina. Some of the land is still in the Payseur family, and over the years, quite a few half-hearted attempts have been made to locate this chest. None have been successful. All right, so Daniel has this son. Daniel's well off, different from his brothers and sisters who seem to be quite hillbilly. No offense, right?
Right.
Daniel's like the city slicker with these. I mean, could you imagine? He was born in Versailles and he has to share a house with these rednecks. Like, I just think, oh my God, like what a life. Meanwhile, his sister's over living in the Habsburg Palace in Austria, and he's got to go clean up cow shit. Like, some of this stuff, I'm like, this is just actually really comical to me. Like, if you really think about it. But so Daniel was known to have been relatively well off financially. His son Jonas was even more well off. Where did his wealth come from? We can only surmise. But if Daniel was indeed the lost Dauphin of France, it stands to reason that he would have access to at least a certain amount of funds. All right, that's Jonas. So that's, if the legend is true, that's the grandson of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI.
Right.
All right. which is the big thing here. This we have to remember. It's bigger than because she's a Habsburg and he's a Bourbon. So that's a very strong bloodline for the Illuminati right there. As you remember from an earlier chapter, Louis Charles came into an inheritance from General Kleber over $1 million. Also, with the conspiracy to hide the Dauphin and to get him out of danger, it was reasonable to assume some of his royal possessions were able to leave the country with him. After all, his father, Louis XVI, was one of, if not the most richest person in all of Europe. So even a small amount of his wealth could have been a very substantial amount. All right. So we also mentioned earlier, if true, the Dauphin had considerable help from George III of England. Besides being a distant relative of the French monarchy, King George had a fear that the revolutions in American colonies and in France would spread to England. As with most of the monarchs in Europe, he didn't want that to happen in his home country. If the stories are true, it's reasonable to assume that King George III supplied young Daniel with sufficient gold and silver.
Right.
Along with the ship and the 600 acres of lands that he forged his daddy's signature on. Now, what does this mean? This means that if revolution hit France, there's a gentleman's agreement. George is giving him all this money, so he would take them in and hide them as well.
Right. Goes both ways.
Yeah. I scratch your back, you scratch. Imagine making a deal like that with an 8-year-old. Like I just the 8-year-old's probably like, whatever, just give me my toy soldiers and I'm good. Okay. So we also have the fact that we have Jean Lafitte that ended up there that bought a bunch of land as well, super rich, which Jonas Payseur ends up buying a lot of land in conjunction with Lorenzo Ferreira, aka Jean Lafitte. Then we have the idea that we know it's not, that is now can be excluded, that it was Marshal Michel Ney, but he's there. That's part of the legend, but we now know that's not the same guy. But he was there. A French guy was there with Daniel Payseur, as well as Lafayette making a stop to speak with young Daniel, older now, who is the actual heir, supposed to be on the French throne. Now, Jonas. So we get to Jonas. Jonas was born in Lincoln County in 1819. He was the second child born to Daniel Payseur and the firstborn son. Jonas married Harriet Smith in 1845. She was also born in Lincoln County, North Carolina, and her date of birth was Christmas Day in 1823. In 1884, Jonas died and was buried at Pleasant Grove Methodist Church Cemetery between Crows and Howard's Creek area of Lincoln County. That's how small this area is. They have to say between these creeks, he was buried. Y'all, this is not Versailles. Like, I'm just
right.
I mean, being from the South myself, this is what's wild to me. Like how like out in the sticks this is. So this is
no gardens, no palaces or anything. You're out there in the sticks.
No, this is what's so crazy. Like literally, they're marking in this book where he's buried is between two creeks, or cricks, as they say, not at a mausoleum in Versailles, right? So now there is we know that the son receives the bulk of the parents' money at this point, especially if they're Bourbons. So Jonas receives the bulk of Daniel's money. Now, Jonas was known to have at least a moderate amount of money in contrast with his brothers and sisters. Shortly before the Civil War, Jonas began buying property. Much of this property was in the city limits of Lincolnton, close to the property that Lorenzo Ferreira was himself buying. All right. Now, there's rather curious that both Daniel and his primary heir, Jonas, were believed to have many treasure chests. So now the legend has grown to even more treasure chests. So, Jessica, if you're in the chat, let's get one of those metal detectors and let's just go.
Yeah.
I'll even come in that.
We can find this stuff. So we'll have a remote view it, see if she can find where it's.
You have to get a treasure hunter.
Exactly right. So none of the siblings. I mean, could you imagine like your adopted brother is like the Prince of France? I mean, that must suck for these other siblings to have to go like milk cows, right? Like, and brother's got like chest of like, daddy boy, you can't just spare me one little coin. Like, come on. I have to pretend to be your sister. You might as well help a girl out. All right, Jessica, let's go. So this is why you guys like this is why I love history, because I always say on my channel, history ain't nothing but gossip. That's all history is. It's just gossip.
Right.
Sometimes we read these stories and we forget about the details of like, can you imagine? Like, can you imagine your parents being like sitting the siblings down and be like, so we have a family secret. He's not really your brother. He's the Dauphin of France. And you're like, but does he still have to help us like shovel the horse shit? Like, taking out of chores? Like, what does this mean? Like, I don't know.
Right.
So this is hysterical to me. Like, I can't imagine. No wonder the town of North Carolina still whispers about this. No wonder this is better than any reality TV show. Like, this is the best reality TV show to watch. Could you imagine the Southern women sitting out? I mean, in the South, like women gossip because they say this is how they gossip. We'll pray for you. Oh, did you hear about Jonas Payseur? I hear he's got these. We should pray for him. He's got all these treasure chests he's got to keep hidden. We should pray for him. That's how they're
sharing.
Yeah. We should really pray that he gets this Holy Spirit so that he can share with the community. That's what the women in the South will do. I want to go back in time. If I could travel back in time, I'm going to go back to this time. I want to walk around this town in North Carolina. I want to hear what the gossip is about these wars. I want to hear what the prayer request is, because that's these women who get around and pray. It ain't nothing but a gossip coven. That's all they are. It's been that way. One time when I was homesick from school, my mama had her prayer group up, and I sat there and listened to those ladies, and it hit me at a young age. I was like, they're not praying, they're gossiping. They're in prayer, gossiping. So I can't imagine. And the other kids, like what they would have been saying about the other peasant children, the peasants. And then crazy. So anyway, but Jonas gets even more interesting because it is apparently suspected that he filed bankruptcy when the Civil War happened, but he still had money. So it sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Right.
He did that to try to, from the carpetbaggers coming down, the Yankees coming down, he was trying to hide his wealth. So then we get, which again, I don't blame him for that. Can't fault the guy for that. I'd probably do the same thing. But then we get to Cass Payseur.
Oh,
this is where it gets real interesting, guys. And this is where even Stephen Payseur, at the end of his book, he doesn't really give an opinion, but he kind of sways to this probably isn't true, even though it's his own family. But the one thing that Stephen Payseur cannot put his finger on is how did Cass Payseur? We know Jonas and Daniel are wealthy, but there's a difference between being wealthy and being wealthy enough to have as much capital to start the businesses that Cass Payseur started. This is where the conspiracy gets real serious, because I agree. In order to start all these businesses, you need capital.
Right.
Where did this money? And he was still wealthy. So how did he have all this extra money to start? So let's get into Louis Cass Payseur, also known as Cass Payseur. Probably no member of the Payseur family has had more written about him than Louis Cass Payseur. If you could conduct a Google search on the internet, you will find page after page on Louis Cass. You found so much stuff on this guy, didn't you, Gerald, on Cass Payseur, on all of his businesses that he started.
Should we bring him up, just talk about him real quick?
Yeah, I'll give you his dates, though, so you guys know his date of when he lived. So he was born on October 18th, 1850, a Libra. He was the oldest child of Jonas and Harriet Smith Payseur. In 1874, Cass married Mary Alice Hudson in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Spartanburg. I can literally get there in like an hour. Now that's Southern. So they moved to Spartanburg. They later moved to Lancaster, South Carolina for most of their lives. Both are buried at the Westside Cemetery in Lancaster. At least they're not buried in between two creeks. Both of them lived long lives, with Mary Alice dying in 1934 and Cass in 1939. They have 5 children. One died as an infant, and the 4 other lived long lives. Only 5 years later, let's see. Okay. So they, after the Civil War, when Jonas filed for bankruptcy, 5 years later, Cass and his wife show up in South Carolina with all this money. They open up a store in Lancaster. Okay. I don't know if we should, let's get, because this is where all the businesses start. You guys are going to recognize these businesses. All in South Carolina. He is the Payseur building. He sold jewelry, clocks, watches, and other items in general. He owned the Payseur building. He ended up opening up the Bank of Lancaster, which became, drumroll, the Bank of America.
Right.
Now, there's speculation on whether he had anything to do with it becoming Bank of America. Stephen says he died before, but he's got 4 kids, so there's still a bit of question mark. Lancaster and Chester Railroad he opened. I mean, so many businesses. So I guess, and he Leroy Springs. He partnered with Leroy Springs to create Spring Industries. That has long been one of the most prominent textile manufacturers in the world. They started the First Baptist Church of Lancaster. I always laugh about that. We see all these dirty deeds and like, yeah, but they open up a church too. It's fine.
Yeah.
So do you want to go through that list here? I mean, it's wild.
Yeah. Everybody should know these. I mean, you got Carnegie Steel. So, I mean, everybody knows how wealthy Carnegie was, and he was a railroad tycoon, and you had to buy his steel to build your railroads.
Carnegie also owned some of the islands off of the state of Georgia. So they were down south a lot, and that has to do with Jekyll Island and the creation of the Federal Reserve there. It's all linked.
Yep. And, you know, American Motors, General Motors, Cadillac. I mean, my gosh, this is... Everybody should know Mutual Life Insurance. So he owned all the insurance companies, RJ Reynolds. And then look at, like you said, the watches. If you bought a watch, you were going to buy one of his watches. Elgin, Springfield, Waltham, Waterbury. Everybody should know all these names one way or another.
Yeah.
Colt Firearms, Standard Oil, Exxon, BF Goodrich.
I mean, it makes you gives me a little chill bumps because, and that's where Stephen in this book kind of goes, I don't really believe. Like, Stephen's like, you can tell some of the dates don't match. He's like, I don't think Daniel Payseur was Louis Charles. I think it's a fun story. But the one place where in this book, Stephen's like, but this is the one thing that gets him is like, where did he get the capital? To become
dug up one of those chests of gold.
Right?
Yeah.
The biggest tycoons in America.
This is the one that kills me, though. Bear Aspirin Company. And we know how bad Bear is as far as
there's
big
lots of speculations of him dealing with both the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds in very close proximities. Again, you guys, this is very close to Jekyll Island, which is off the coast of Georgia, which is a barrier island where they created the Federal Reserve. So that's, and I agree. Well, like, the story's fabulous, but this is where I start. This is where my hair stands on end because I'm like, Stephen's right. There's a difference between being wealthy and then being that rich.
Right.
So this is Springer, and supposedly he's off the Rothschild line. His business partner.
So did it change? Did Daniel's, if Daniel was Louis Charles, did his trajectory change at some point because they couldn't get him back on the throne of England? So they said, if we're not going to put you on the throne in England, we'll make your ancestors rulers of America.
Yeah.
Through industry. Yep.
Going to be king of one way or another.
Right. And we're talking, I mean, and he briefly mentions that Louis the 16th, that's why the French Revolution was so bloody, because they were so wealthy and the people couldn't eat. So if he's taking even a fraction of that wealth, plus the support of the British royal family, which the British royal family is still on the freaking throne, also doing the tango with the Rothschilds.
Right.
And who would suspect a tiny little town in North Carolina? Well, obviously the church ladies probably suspected it because they knew all the gossip. So
they're always right.
They're always women didn't really work back then, so they just watched it. Like, what else you gonna do in a one-horse town but sit on your porch, drink your sweet tea, and just watch the neighbors? So
I know what you're doing.
I know, and everybody spoke French back then. My mother speaks French. Like, French was a common language in the South, so it's not like they could have private conversations. The church ladies knew what you were saying. But the fact that Jonas Payseur filed bankruptcy and then 5 years later his oldest son shows up in South Carolina with all this money and just boom starts this industry.
Well, Rose and over on Rumble says, what about the pirates? So did Lafayette and
He obviously left money too, because I think Lafayette or Jean
or Lafitte and Marquise de Lafayette. Maybe they both funded them to start with.
And I think they were handlers. I think that's what we would call them today, would be handlers. I mean, kind of cool. If you got to have a handler, you might as well have a handler. Like
a rich one.
I mean, right? Like, that's kind of fun stories to tell the grandkids. Like my handler was Jean Lafitte. Like, you know, like they did this mother and daughter who wrote a bunch of research into this Lorenzo Ferrer. They actually were allowed into the Freemasonry lodge there. They're from that area of North Carolina. They were allowed in, and they got to see a sword that had been left there that had Jean Lafitte's name on it.
Oh, really?
So that's pretty conclusive. That did I write it down? Oh, yes, I did. The book is called Jean Lafitte Revealed. That was written in March 2021. So if you guys want a really good book where it proves that taking Daniel Payseur out of it, taking everything out of it, this book and their evidence proves that we at least know that Lorenzo Ferrer was Jean Lafitte. It's more than evidence than just the sword. There's all sorts of evidence they found irrefutable that Jean Lafitte had faked his death and was living in North Carolina as Lorenzo Ferrer. So that we know is accurate. We know that's accurate.
Right.
Everything else is in question. So we know that Michelle Ney, Peter Stewart Ney was not Michelle. We know that they have exhumed his body. DNA didn't match. But that's not to say that Michelle Ney did not fake his death, because it kind of sounds like he did. And of course, if you've got this big military man who's the Marquis de Lafayette that came through, again, why would, even at that point, thinking about the United States geography, even that point was way bigger than European countries.
Right.
So if you're a European, Marquis de Lafayette was like given like honorable citizenship. Like he was really honored in the United States. There's many monuments to him for his contribution to the American Revolution. So if you're going on tour, I mean, if you really think about that, especially for the Americans, I know for the Europeans, it might be kind of hard to think about this because I know our country is a lot bigger, especially in horses and buggies, to make a point to stop in the Appalachians.
Right.
In a tiny town.
Now, is that right there on the edge of the Louisiana Purchase? I mean, that was because that was a big section in the U.S. that that the French controlled.
It's no, it's not close. It's like, so North Carolina, South Carolina, it's like inland North Carolina by Tennessee, and then you've got like Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi, and then Alabama, and then you've got that over there. So it was a pretty big distance from the whole, because the Louisiana Purchase, guys, for those who are not American, it wasn't just the state of Louisiana, it was a whole area that was owned by that Napoleon sold to the United States in like 1803 or something. So no, it wasn't close at all. I think that would have been dangerous if they had sent him close to Louisiana because of Napoleon's control. I think that would have been very dangerous. And I think the people living in New Orleans in that area would have probably suspected more than people living in North Carolina. I mean, listen, those church ladies must have been all just aghast when the Marquis de Lafayette came through. Can you imagine? Like, that would have been like Mick Jagger coming through a tiny town. Like, they're probably like, oh my stars.
Yeah.
Lafayette is here. Why is he going to the Payseur house? Like, so I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys think the legend is true?
I think it very well possibly could be.
Yeah, there's a possibility.
I have a question mark too. Out of all the, for every real conspiracy, there's like 20 that are fake, right?
Yeah.
So, but this one, and if you guys get the Book of Daniel, it's called the Book of Daniel. It's written by Stephen. You could read it in one day, but he's funny. Stephen Payseur is actually really funny in this book. He's writing about his family. Can you imagine, like? And you'd be like, I don't know, guys. Like, I don't know if I'm related to Bourbons or not, but there are Bourbons still alive. There are, the Spanish royal family is Bourbon. They're Bourbons. So I think there could be a way to test their DNA against the DNA of the surviving Bourbons, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Right.
I don't think that's going to happen.
It wouldn't benefit them.
No. And if they're trying to keep this a secret in order to get that, it's kind of that Trojan horse rule. Now, with that being said, like, I don't know. Was Daniel Payseur a willing participant, or did he just have to do what he, do this? And I think he was probably the luckiest of. Maybe Jonas actually was the luckiest of them all. He didn't have to get dragged through Europe, fighting wars, being hidden.
Well, if he had all these handlers, being eight years old, he wouldn't know any better. That's just the way he was brought up and trained. And then his kids going forward, that would just be their life.
That's what they have to do and keep. It's amazing if this is true that they have kept this a secret all these years.
Yeah.
Those damn church ladies, man, they're the ones that
church ladies.
The church ladies. I don't know. I'm just making that up, guys, because that's usually how it goes in the South. It's the church ladies. They know everything before anybody else does.
We expected donation to the church too, by the way.
Yeah. We'll sell you the gossip if you donate. Yeah. Oh, I will. Speaking of church ladies, they're for the people from the South, y'all will appreciate. They're savage. These church ladies are savage. I was watching, there's a TikTok account where this guy finds old recipes and makes them from like old, because church books.
Right. Yeah.
He used to make cookbooks and sell them.
Right.
He was making this recipe. And there was one ingredient that was rogue, and he's like, I don't understand. He's like, God, that's gross. Without this ingredient, it'd be good. And somebody put in the comments, they're like, oh no, that's what the church ladies did. They would donate their recipes to the church cookbook, but they would always add in a rogue ingredient so that no one could ever make their chocolate chip
as good as them. Right.
What honest, sweet ladies.
Oh my God. I don't know. If an old school lady tells you you look at health, they will tell you you're fat and ugly, and you'll think they just blessed you with holy water. Like the way So I don't know. Daniel Payseur might have been like, that prison at the Bastille was a little better than these ladies. These ladies are a little scarier than the people in the Napoleon. So yeah, I can't wait. I was kind of reading the comments as we were going, but I can't wait to hear other people's experience with this story. It's so there's so many rabbit holes. That's just an overview. That's a Cliff Notes version of this. Even like as Gerald, he found so much. You could do like a 3-hour show just on Casper.
I think we could. Like I told you before the show, I loved looking all this up. But I was so fascinated about the Abraham Lincoln being possibly the brother to what was it, a Springer? Yes.
Yeah. So Abraham Lincoln ties into the story, y'all. It's what the spider web of this story is just. Wow. Hollywood missed an opportunity.
Looking up Marie Antoinette. I found somebody who was at their Versailles Gardens, and they said they had like a time slip, and have you seen that?
I've covered that story. I've covered it on my channel before. I have to go back and review it, but it was like 2 English teachers that had a time slip.
Yeah.
Wow.
I always, because I know with hauntings, because everything's haunted in the South. It's either sometimes it's like something very stressful happens. It's like the energy takes a picture in that moment, and so it's not really a ghost, but it's like a video of what. So sometimes people, and that was right before their arrest, so I'm sure there was a lot of stress, obviously.
Yeah, so she's out there in the garden. I think she was painting a picture when the 2 English ladies went over that little bridge, and all of a sudden it's like there's Marie Antoinette.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, like Marie Antoinette, like I said, if you guys really look at the politics, we like to romanticize these people who got guillotined, but I think we like to romanticize Marie Antoinette. So many movies have been made about her, but if you really look at their politics, they kind of deserved it. Honestly, like they're like the Build Back Better group of our world. What they were doing to their people was just, but playing devil's advocate, Marie Antoinette and Louis the 16th were so young that did they really understand what they were getting into? I don't know. It's hard. And of course,
they always talk about, eat your pie and have your cake too.
Yeah. Well, and
they wanted everything.
They wanted everything. And Marie Antoinette did have a spending problem. But she was a Habsburg. She grew up like that. You know, her family ruled Europe. They were connected to all the monarchies. And so that's what makes, if Daniel Payseur is their son, that's what makes this so potent. Now, and on the side of light, we were talking about this off camera, and on the side of light, where I hope we all are, service to others, we don't believe in like elite bloodlines because we're all God's children. We're all equal. But in the side of darkness, they do believe in elite bloodlines.
Right.
And they do believe, and I know why, and we can do that in another show. I said we could talk about because I've covered that as well, the different bloodlines and why they favor some bloodlines over others, because in its literal blood, guys, it's literally blood types they're looking for, and it's for a particular, every blood type has different quirks, we'll say. And there's one particular bloodline that they value the most because of spiritual abilities. So which is what leads to a lot of inbreeding. So
we know what they did.
Oh yeah, they told. I mean, the Habsburg. It's amazing Marie Antoinette was as good looking as she was, because most of those Habsburgs, a little scary looking because they inbred a little too much. So, you know, they always make fun of us here in the South for being inbreeding. I was laughing. I was like, have you the monarchs? I mean, what? You know, so, but I cannot wait to see everybody else's comments. I can't wait to see what everybody else thinks about this story.
Mhm.
What do y'all think? And again, disclaimer, don't go beating up any Payseurs, y'all.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't do that.
Yeah, they probably don't have a chest of gold, so don't even probably know anything about it.
Yeah. So Mad Pax, I'll tell you, that is an incorrect conspiracy theory. The RH negative are not Nephilim. The Nephilim are not here on this earth right now. They're not. So are any RH negative? So I know I'm RH negative as well. Don't worry. You're not a Nephilim. You're not.
See, I saw that on TikTok yesterday too, about AB actually taking you back to the old world, or the
Yeah,
so
we
I
can
don't
look
know.
into all of that. So
Yeah.
just quick, the esoteric occults believe I'm O negative, so they don't think my people are O negative. They don't think we have any type of connection to this earth at all, which the Cassiopeians, and I agree with them, they say none of us are from this planet. Like, what are you talking about? But there's nothing in our blood. So I'm O negative. That's what the Payseurs, that's what the as I say on my channel, the Illuma Shmati, that's what they like, is the O negative, and there are reasons for that. And then A is type 1 human, B is type 2 human. And so if you're AB negative, Mad Pax, then you are type 1 human, type 2 human, with what they call bloodline of the gods, since you have no RH in you, and you have no rhesus factor in you.
Right.
So like my boyfriend is A negative. So he's, according to the occult, for me, I see this totally different, but according to them, the occult, my boyfriend would be type 1 human plus bloodline of the gods. It's wild. Like, I don't believe that anybody is any better than anybody else, right? Like, we're all equal. We're all, there's different, the antigens you carry in your blood give certain personality types, but that's just your karma for this life. Like, and they all have their strengths and their weaknesses. Yeah.
Right.
And my boyfriend's an A. They struggle with like wanting to nap all the time. So that's like,
well, it probably came down to the blue bloods. They had to say something to make themselves special to compare to everybody else.
And that's the O negative. So that's what I am. And there's different, so that's the pure bloodline. So I have nothing in my blood at all. So, but we can do a show over that if you guys want.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
We'll probably do another show about bloodlines or something.
Yeah.
Now, Rose over here in Rumble says, I wonder if Count of Saint Germain is in this story at all. He might be in there somewhere. Who knows?
They're all in there somewhere.
No.
Like playing bingo with the Payseurs, because I was like, we've got pirates, we've got Freemasons, we have church ladies.
Now we got vampires. We might as well.
We've God. So I think Amanda what is RH? And Amanda said, what's RH negative? So Amanda, so you're either RH negative or RH positive. So like I'm O negative. So that means I don't have the RH factor in my blood. So if you have a plus sign by your name, that means you do. 85% of the world's population is RH positive. Only 15% of us are RH negative. All our presidents have been RH negative. All monarchies are RH negative. All of our global leaders are RH negative. They take that very serious in the Illuma Schmati, as we say.
Right.
So allegedly they monitor kids who squeaked out, like those of us who are peasants, us peasants, like my boyfriend and I who squeaked. And my boyfriend descends from Sir Thomas More. So my boyfriend descends from royal court in England. So he's got the negative, RH negative as well. They keep an eye on us if we're not in their group. Like if somehow some of their blood got out to the peasants, they allegedly monitor us. So people who were pulled at school sometimes when they were little kids,
right,
tested. It might be like my school required us to get our fingers pricked every year and test our blood. I went to a private school. Looking back, I'm like, that's weird.
Yeah, that's weird.
Why were you just But I went to a private school, so I imagine that a lot of those kids probably had RH negative blood, because you think about in the South, these private schools are very old school money, old school Southern money.
Right.
So I would imagine that there's a higher percentage of RH negatives.
You know, the thing that made me wonder is when we're talking about Huguenots and all that, my family came from that. But then on my mom's side, bunch of Lutherans. My uncle was a Lutheran priest. I mean, they were very heavy in the Lutherans. So now we had Huguenots and Lutherans.
They were all
my mom and dad married.
That was that whole German, like if you do 23andMe, it just says French and Germanic. Like they connect them at the same. So it's all inner, like I said, the blonde hair, blue eyes, that comes from continental Europe. So like the UK did not allegedly, take it with a grain of salt, as in most history, did not have blonde hair, blue eyed people until 1066, or there were very few minorities until 1066 when William came over and conquered and put the family line that's on the throne now on the throne. And they didn't speak English on the throne until like after Henry VIII. I mean, they were speaking French. So you see the blonde hair, blue eye being very French and very Germanic, which is mostly my family too. My last name is Watson, but I got very very little English compared to the rest of it. So it's fascinating. It's very fascinating.
I mean, you talk about everybody being related. Just think about like when the Romanov family was killed. Every one of those kings were all cousins.
Oh, I know. I've covered the Romanovs before. Lord have mercy. Catherine the Great was terrible, by the way, all the greats. But that woman, if y'all remember it, she had like furniture that was very inappropriate. And I keep thinking, could you imagine going into your grandmother's attic and finding that shit? Like, I feel so. Her son was a little messed up in the head, and I was like, I don't blame him. His mother had tables with like phallics on it. Like, that's gonna mess with your head a little bit. Like, can you imagine finding that stuff in your grandmama's attic? Like, I can't. Like, the Romanovs are very, very fascinating. And was it the Tsar and Tsarina Alexandria who was killed by the Volkovich? She was the granddaughter of Victoria. Both her and her husband were Fruit Loops.
And now they're saying President Trump's wife could be Anastasia.
No, she's not.
I know, but have you seen that online?
I've seen those conspiracies. I've researched deep into that. Anastasia, yeah, but they were dumb. Alexandria, his wife, she was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. She I don't know if that girl even knew how to write her name. She sounded like a good time. She's probably fun at a party, but running a country like Mary Stuart, everybody glorifies Mary Stuart, and I'm like, why? She was a spoiled brat who was dumb. She was dumb. Like, no. She got what kind of she deserved because she was dumb. Like, her IQ was not that high, y'all. Like, she had no business ruling anybody. So I think sometimes we glorify these leaders, but we have to remember, and not everybody born into the royal family is bad. Obviously, you can't judge, but you can judge them by their actions, and you can look at these policies. And like Peter the Great was a tyrant. Russia grew powerful under Peter the Great because he was taxing the crap out of people. It's tight. So we have to start looking at the literal policies of these people and stop glamorizing them.
And
right?
just like you said earlier, though, I mean, you're talking about she might have been dumb as a box of rocks, but just like this young kid, he had handlers and people to advise and steer him the way that they wanted to go. So she would have had the same thing. She would have had people of science and
Well,
people of politics.
Mary Stewart basically gave them the middle finger and had to run away from them. She had to leave because she didn't do it because she wanted to have all these. She wanted to have the husband she wanted to have, and then she like killed her husband. And they're like, you can't do that. Like, even though you're queen, you can't do that. It's wild. It is wild.
The royal family didn't have a problem killing off cousins and brothers and uncles and aunts. They just like, oh, get on my way. You might be a threat to me later. I need to get rid of you.
Listen, if I lived back in those times, I would just let me be a peasant. Just let me worry about putting food on the table. I would hate to be in the royal court because it was stressful. And they did not execute kindly. They did very brutal executions. And I just mostly for Trump. I mean, like I said, my boyfriend's a descendant of Sir Thomas More, and Sir Thomas More was not a good guy, trust me. But he's very famous. He was the lawyer who worked with Henry VII and Henry VIII, and he was brutally executed because he wouldn't take Anne Boleyn as the queen. He was Catholic. He would die knowing my boyfriend grew up Methodist. But he was a staunch Catholic. And so he got brutally. If you ever watch this show, is it Showtime or HBO, the Tudor series?
Yes.
You see him getting the guy who plays Sir Thomas More. Why do I keep saying my brother? Maybe it's because we're talking about inbreeding so much. He's not my brother. He's my boyfriend. We're not related.
You said you weren't inbred.
We're not related at all. But my boyfriend is a direct descendant of his through his daughter Cicely. He collected her father's head off of the spike. I was like, that's some brutal ancestry to carry here.
Well, we'll just clear it up by saying, well, Brice's boyfriend may or may not be her brother. And
I have a really funny story about that. I didn't know much about my dad's mother's family. I remembered a little bit about them. So I had a friend she did some ancestry, and I was like, oh my God, they're so cool. The Benets, they were French as well. They went by Bennett, but they were the Benets. They were Huguenots. They came up from New Orleans into South Georgia, and they were lawyers and judges, and they founded all these towns. And so we were driving down to Florida to see his family, and we stopped in the town in Quitman to see some of these landmarks. Like my great grandfather's house is still there, and it's a flower shop now. Apparently it's haunted. Like, that's wild to know that your great grandfather haunts somewhere. I feel like I need to go there and be like, all right, Spencer, it's time to move on. It's your great granddaughter. You got to move. You got to go. But we were standing in this cemetery, and I'm looking at this old cemetery of all my ancestors that from like the 1800s. And my boyfriend knew that one of his descendants, who is also a descendant of Sir Thomas More, Jesse Knight, he settled like Tampa, Sarasota, all this whole area of Florida where his family lives now. But he knew he had come down from Georgia. He was a dairy farmer and had driven his cattle during the Civil War down and settled these towns in Florida. So that's all he really knew. So we're standing in this old historic cemetery in Quitman, Georgia, tiny town. We're looking at all the Bennetts, and then all of a sudden we start seeing these Knight markers.
Oh,
I look at Todd and I was like, oh my God. Oh my God, are we related?
Oh no.
Thank God I had done 23andMe. Todd had not done it because he's smart and he didn't want the government looking at his DNA. I was stupid. I did it. But his mom has done it too, and she has not popped up on my 20.
wow.
Thank God.
That's probably because they changed their name.
I don't know. Well, I was just like, I felt like my blood ran out of my face, and I looked at him. I was like, oh my God, is this a family cemetery? Are we related? We're not related at all. So, so it's funny, but yeah, no, we can do that. If you guys ever want to do a bloodline breakdown, it's so fascinating. You can figure out, I believe we're all equal. We all have different strengths,
right?
With our blood. And so I can tell you what different blood types are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. And then you can kind of know yourself better.
I don't even know if I really know what mine is. I know it's not O, it's AB or something. I don't know.
You can just you can do a blood test yourself. That's what my boyfriend did. It's funny with Rh negative. Most women know they're Rh negative because of childbirth. So I knew, no, May, my family are not clones. You can't actually, Rh negatives can't be cloned. Cannot be cloned. Rh negatives there's no availability to clone Rh negatives. That's the one bloodline that can't be cloned. But with Rh negatives though, most girls, especially born of a certain age, will know that they're Rh negative because they tell you when you're really young that you have something about your blood that's going to make you, because you can't. So science sees Rh negatives as a different species almost. So if I were to get pregnant with an Rh positive, my body would try to get rid of the baby. Because my blood can't handle Rh. So like my sister's husband is Rh positive. She's also Rh negative. So now they have shots they give women so that they can carry to full term.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it's still hard. It's still really hard for Rh negative women. They typically have a harder. One of my nieces is negative too. So that was the easiest pregnancy for my sister. But what I found, so some men don't know their blood type because it doesn't matter for the man, right? It doesn't.
Yeah, I've never known mine. So I just know it's not O.
Yeah, it can't be. It's the woman that it matters because she's the one that has to carry it. So most men, if they're Rh negative, the doctor really never says anything because it doesn't matter. And then we found out my boyfriend was Rh negative. I was kind of banking on him being positive because that helps with birth control, right? It's harder to get pregnant. Oh, shit. When I found out he was negative, I was like, we gotta be a little more careful because my body's not going to reject it. So
dang it.
So yeah, so it's but yeah, that's what they do. They want the O negative specifically for many reasons, which we can talk about a different show. Stupid reasons. I think the Illuminati is stupid. I think they're dummies. Like, it's too stressful. All that money and all that stress, like, who needs it? I'm all for the peasant.
Well, like the year they went out to Bohemian Grove and it was out there dancing in the woods naked and got poison ivy. Are you guys that really dumb? Seriously.
I don't like camping, so I'd be like, yeah, this isn't going to work for me. I want to be in a hotel room. I don't like being dirty.
They had all these world leaders or all these people ended up going to the hospital or whatever, get treated for poison ivy. So, you idiots.
Dumb. They're dumb. They're just, it's dumb. Like the stress of I don't know. I just like, I would so much rather be a peasant. It's stupid. The whole pecking order thing is stupid. Like people should. Listen, we don't need a child. We have a dog. We have a dog.
That's your kid.
Our dog, what they say, no animal is as lucky as the dog that's owned by two parents that don't have a child because he is our child. So and I have 2 nephews and 2 nieces that my sister married an Italian Catholic, so none of her children have been planned. So she's making enough babies for all of us. So
when we talk about bloodlines, are we going to add this one?
That's my boyfriend. That's one of his specialties. So, but I know I have to hop off soon. Speaking of my boyfriend, so this is so fun, you guys. I love this story. We should petition Hollywood to make this into a movie.
I think so. I think a series on Netflix would be awesome. Maybe it should go to HBO though. It'd be better if it was on HBO, maybe.
Drama or comedy, either take your pick, both, because I personally want to cast the church ladies. They have to be written into the story,
right?
Because they were there, all y'all, as we say in the South, know those church ladies played a big role in this conspiracy getting out the way it did.
Well, before you go ahead and tell everybody, because you just recently changed the Academy's name, and I think our code Midwest Night is still applicable on your membership.
Yes. So if you guys use their code in the description box to Fusion Body Studio, we used to be the Esoteric Academy, but we realized people didn't even know what we were doing. So I love researching dead people, as you guys know. I love dead people. But my job offline, I'm the only female in the state of Georgia to be KPJY authorized, which means I basically have a level of education in Eastern philosophy. I spent a lot of years in India studying. I love God. I love spirituality. I love pondering those questions about why are we here? Why are we here? What's the point of all this? And so I spent a lot of my life studying that, and now I teach that. And when the pandemic came, of course, a lot of our shalas shut down. My boyfriend owns AYA, one of the biggest shalas here in the Southeast. And so my friend Paula over in the UK, in Australia, and I opened Fusion Body Studio, where we're taking a lot of the theory of traditional yoga, which is really complicated and kind of looks like an exorcism. And we took that theory and we put it in more modern exercises. So it's more accessible to more people,
Right.
To help people really work through this time. Because these conspiracies are fun, but they're really just to help us, motivate us to really ask the real question, which comes from within. And really working on ourselves. And so I always say on the studio, just because it's hard doesn't mean it can't be fun. So we do a lot of hard work. We have, so $25 a month is the first tier, and that's exercise classes that literally just work the body and go through the spiritual stuff. We also have the $40 a month tier, which also covers like workshops if you want to go into like the Bhagavad Gita, or like more Ayurvedic studies, or more philosophy, more Yoga Sutra studies. So, but if you're not interested in that, you just want to work on your body, because the body is the Shakti, or the expression of the soul in motion, then you can just do the lower one. But if you enter in their code in the description box, you get 20% off on top of that for 6 months. And you also get the first 7 days for free just to try it out. And we charge really low rates, Paula and I, because we're on the internet. And so we have unlimited seats. And so we can make the cost as low as possible to help as many people as we can.
Yeah. I like to say yoga has a bad name on some people, like, ooh, you're not supposed to do that. When I lost a bunch of weight, I was doing the yoga stretches. It will kick your butt.
Oh, it kicks your butt. Listen.
Good exercising.
Don't even get me started on like the Christian church at this point is itself so blasphemous, because it absolutely, the missing books of the Bible, Jesus, Yahshua, teaches his disciples yoga. Yoga is about union with God. It's it's mental focus and remembering that God is within. And I think the reason why a lot of religions talk down on yoga is because when you're doing a practice like that, like yoga gets to the core, the root of what all these religions are looking for. But it's sovereignty. It's your sovereignty. So you don't become dependent upon a pastor or a rabbi. You know, it's you and it's God. Some of the most profound moments that I've had with God have been on my yoga mat, broken. Like, where, because the body keeps the score. The body holds all the trauma, it holds all the karma. And so when you start to move it and open it, information, it triggers you, and you have to face that. And that's what we came here, is to face that so we can refine our soul. And my teacher in India, who just recently passed away, was all the teachers I've experienced in India. Some of the most soft-spoken, loving people. They're tough, but they're loving. And the fact that in India, yoga is a Brahmin practice. It's a priestly practice, the highest caste in India. The fact that they even opened up their doors to white people, pariahs, to come in and do this speaks more of the grace of Yahshua than be careful with Kundalini yoga, Mel. I'm just going to stop for a second there, because Kundalini yoga is fake. That was a 3-letter agency. Yogi Bhajan was a 3-letter agency. It's just hyperventilation. That's all he's doing. So be very careful with that. Try Iyengar or Ashtanga. That's the lineage based. So you have to really go to India to find. But the grace of Yahshua, I found more in my teacher, my Hindu yoga teacher, than I ever found in a church. Just the loving grace of allowing everyone in, and being gentle and being funny too, and letting us have our moments and letting us be Westerners. He never forced us to try to be Indians. He let us be Westerners. And so, yeah. So I would absolutely, but we have Ashtanga on Fusion Yoga, Fusion Body Studio. But I also do I fuse different bar, which is ballet, a lot of Mula Bandha, which is the baseline of the body, but it pulls the energy up the spine through the chakras. So I do a lot to strengthen that part of the body. So I'm about to put together an ABBA a cardio dance class, because people requested it. So that's going to be fun. So anyway, so yeah. So actually, Mel, too, I will say be very careful, my friend. Kundalini cannot rise in 3rd density. We only work on getting it to awaken so it rises in 4th density, which we're not in 4th density yet. So just be very careful. Like I said, a lot of that stuff is hyperventilation that they're doing. It's trickery. because Yogi Bhajan was not a yoga teacher. He was from the CIA.
Yeah.
Wow.
So be very careful. That was, it's hyperventilation, Mel. That happens. It tricks the mind. Just be very careful. There's actually a really great documentary out right now called Breath of Fire that goes all into that, about how deceitful Yogi Bhajan was. And it's all a lie. It's all a lie. Those hats you wear, the turbans, you should not be wearing those practicing yoga. That should not be worn. That's Sikh. So I would say, Mel, just do your research before you say you disagree. I would really just look, because the Sikh religion is not. I actually have, if you go on my channel, I have a whistleblower who knew this girl, Primka, who wrote White Bird in a Golden Cage, My Life with Yogi Bhajan, this book right here. If you go on my channel, I have Guru Sant on there, who talks about everything that Yogi Bhajan did.
No, he's not the one that took advantage of women and all that.
Absolutely. RAPE'd her.
Yeah. All right.
Multiple.
I thought I recognized the name when you said it.
Many women were RAPE'd and forced to get rid of.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to watch the words.
Right.
Ran financial scams, stole a bunch of money. Like, it's just crazy. So, and everything's made up. It's none of it comes from the actual text. It's all made up. He was created by, absolutely a cult leader, 100%. And that's what Guru Sant talks about on my channel about the cult. And it's all made up. It's all fraud. So just be very careful when you're working with spiritual teachers. Just be very careful. There's a difference between a teacher and a cult leader. Yeah,
absolutely.
And and you need to be able to research everything. You need to be able to research everything yourself. So anyway, just be careful. I don't want anybody getting hurt. Yeah.
So let's go ahead and end it there. And if you guys have any questions or comments, please leave us comments in the show or whatever's going on. If you have questions for Brice or us, or send us an email at MidwestNightWatchers@gmail.com, and we'll forward it to Brice if it's anything to do with stretching yoga practices, or even this story we talked about tonight. We'll forward it on to her, and we'll get back with you. Yeah. So don't go anywhere, Brice. We'll just go ahead and show our ending video, and just say thanks to everybody that showed up today. We love you guys. It was a great fun. We've been watching the chat. You guys were not only talking about food, but you were actually talking about the subject matter that we were doing. So it's all light and fun. It was fun.
Oh, the church ladies. We got to ask them what their opinion was on this. So,
every time you say church lady, I always think of Saturday Night Live. Could it be Satan?
Well, when Jessica and I go to North Carolina, we'll stop by the church just to be like, have y'all heard this conspiracy? Tell us what you know, ladies.
Well, every time you mentioned an 8-year-old boy, I kept thinking of a boy with a cigarette out of his mouth, too.
Well, I would have given that 8-year-old a cigarette. Trust me, if I saw him in the prison. So, yes.
All right. Much love, everybody.
Bye, guys.
We love you. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Keep looking up.
Keep your vibrations high.